Hello there, my name is David Thomson from the Fraser Valley in British Columbia. Recently I did a video in response to a debate between an atheist and a Christian. The atheist Christopher Hitchens and the Christian John Lennox. But it was an immediate response on my part with no preparation, just speaking from my heart. And actually, I had a very difficult time that day. It was an exceptionally difficult day, so I was quite tired. So I thought I'd prepare properly and have all the receipts with the evidence going to many YouTube videos, right to the right location, and many other sources of reference to back up what I shared in that initial video. Now, the reason I am doing these videos and doing this particular video is not because John Lennox did a poor job. Actually, the opposite is the case. John Lennox is very intelligent and effective in his answers. There's no doubt about that. But I want to share something that goes into a lot more specific sourcing of evidence, of concrete evidence, and also bring out a very positive message. And so I want Christopher Hitchens and those that are atheists to know that I have the greatest respect for you because I believe you are created in the image of God, even if you don't at this point in time. Maybe some of you will eventually. Also, I'm very aware of, for example, the statement that Christ said to the Pharisees. He said, "The publicans and the harlots go into the kingdom of God before you." The Pharisees were proud and self-righteous and had completely lost their relationship with God. It had become a mere ritualism. And so I want to emphasize that I view you as people that could end up, some of you, becoming the greatest saints. I wouldn't call someone, hominoid or whatever the name is that they use for modern man, because to me it implies man evolved. I would say you're God-imaged beings with child of God potential. And so I treat you with the greatest respect in what I'm sharing here, and with humility. And I just want to share this from my heart and share some really amazing evidences and give a very good answer to Christopher Hitchens. But first of all, I do want to play the video with Christopher Hitchens and what he initially says to John Lennox. And so I will do that at this point in time. We'll play that video, and I will minimize myself right now and then bring up that video.
What would it be to believe this? Suppose you did believe that everything that had brought us here was by design. Well, we know that 99.9% of all species that have ever existed just on this planet have become extinct. So heaven has already watched almost 100% of its creation die off, often in very unpleasant, callous circumstances, with folded arms, right? And that's billions of years of geological time. Some people say that Homo sapiens has been around for 100,000 years, some for as long as 250,000. No one says less than 100,000. Francis Collins, the great Christian believer who did the Human Genome Project, says certainly 100,000. I'll take 100. Richard Dawkins thinks it's more. I'll take 100. What does it mean if we're divinely supervised? and divinely created and looked out for. It means that for 98 or so thousand of those years, humans, Homo sapiens, were being born, dying, half of them in childbirth, I would think. Life expectancy maybe of 20 years, maybe 30, people dying essentially of their teeth and of hideous diseases, living in permanent fear. Where are the earthquakes coming from? Where are the lightning strikes coming from? Why is all this? What are these diseases that hit us? We don't know about microbes, we have no idea. That's to say nothing about the fights with neighboring tribes over women, over land, over meat, over subsistence, the torture, the violence, the cruelty that goes on. I don't need to underline all of it, I hope. You can picture it for yourself. First 98,000 years, heaven watches this going on with perfect insouciance. And something like 2,000 to 3,000 years ago decides, right, we have to intervene now. We have to do something about this. Well, what would be the best way of intervening to try and redeem this rather bleak picture? What about having somebody tortured to death in an obscure part of the Middle East? That ought to cure it. Or if you're a Muslim, what about getting an illiterate epileptic shepherd to start babbling and saying that he'd be talking to an archangel? Or what about inventing the figure of Moses in a mountain that's never yet been found by any geographer, Mount Sinai? That's what you'd have to believe. I've got a minute, right? That's what you'd have to believe, and that's why I ask myself, why do the worshippers of this God want to convict him of being such a crummy designer?
I'm Michael Jordan. Stop it. Get some help.
Most of his creations die off, and the rest suffer miserably, and the redemptive offers just don't somehow take, of being cruel and capricious and bungling and incompetent. Why, and callous as a father. And so, since this is as far as I can get now, I have to tell you why I don't think the idea of an eternal father is a good one in any case when I next get the chance to draw breath. But thank you for staying with me this far.
So, there we go. So Christopher shares a lot of things there. He said he's speaking as if they are facts. He's speaking and saying, oh yeah, man is definitely at least 100,000 years old, as if it's a fact. I'm going to show you evidence that shows it is far from a fact. He says, oh, Mount Sinai hasn't been discovered. I'm going to show you irrefutable evidence that not only Mount Sinai has been discovered, but all the evidence of that, but the Red Sea crossing and all of those things. I'm going to show you evidence that will amaze you that the vast majority of the public is not aware of. And here's another point that I want to point out about what Christopher is saying. He's drawing conclusions that God is not good because of observations of suffering in the world. And even as he's describing the suffering, he only emphasizes, oh yeah, for example, people, maybe they only live to 20 years old, and half of them are childbirths that don't happen. That's maybe at certain brief periods of time in history. But we have overwhelming evidence of superior civilizations the further you go back in time, with superior math and with way longer lifespans. And there's lots of evidence for that. It has to do with the degeneration of man. And the evidence of that is overwhelming in archaeology. And I don't have time. That's not the thing I want to emphasize at this point in time. I'm just giving a rough overview here. And I want to say this. I do have a cough that I acquired from probably what was influenza or a really bad cold. And so once in a while I get a tickle. So if you could pardon that, I will still manage to get this information effectively communicated. One of the things in his view and the way he's viewing things is just from a very materialistic perspective. God couldn't be good because there's all this suffering. And I'm going to be showing you the evidence that the physical dimension is a very inferior dimension according to the discoveries of particle physics and the mathematical analysis of that. That there are dimensions all the way from the 4th to the 10th and possibly beyond that are far superior to the physical dimension. I will be showing you empirical evidence of many people that have been highly verified to have been dead for a long time by medical equipment and doctors that repeatedly describe details that it was impossible for them to describe. And that the other realm, the other dimension, which is far superior to the physical, was far more real by many, many times. In fact, so much more real that one person compared the physical dimension to 2D as opposed to 3D as far as how much greater the dimension they were in was. And this is repeatedly the case over and over. Well, it's easy to be like the blind men that are told to feel this elephant. And one feels the legs and says the elephant's like the trunk of a tree. Another feels the tail and says the elephant's like a snake, and so on. It's very easy to draw conclusions and to say things that are facts without looking at all the evidence. If you have a strong desire towards a certain belief. And there's no doubt that those that are atheists and evolutionists do have a strong desire towards their belief, so that they fail to look at all the evidence. And I will point out the very specific examples of that over and over again in the very many videos that I will point to you in this series here of response to such as Christopher Hitchens and other atheists. So without further ado, I'm going to get into showing some of the videos here. So we'll do that in a moment here. I will just minimize myself again. Here we go. First of all, I have taken you to my website at ultimatemeaning.com, where there is a flip book, which is right here. In fact, I should close the book to show you the cover, I suppose. Well, before I make it big, there's the cover. And that's at ultimatemeaning.com. It's free to read. Has many links to YouTube videos. And I want to point out some of the facts about other dimensions that are scientific observations. First of all, it's almost like we're made up of nothingness, because 99.49%, as is pointed out right up here, is empty space. But in that small, minute sub-percentage of space, there's all these dimensions, and the physical dimension is very inferior to these other dimensions, according to mathematical analysis. And so I want to show you some of that evidence on the mathematical analysis. You can take this flip book, you can make it larger like that. And I could open up these videos right here, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to mention this gentleman right down here, Robert A. Harriman, a professor of mathematics at the U.S. Naval Academy, has written a book titled Science Declares Our Universe is Intelligently Designed. Now, he recently passed away, and here is a picture. So now his articles are not up where they used to be, and I do have a link in my Kindle book to his articles. This is my Kindle book right here, and this is on this particular mathematical analysis that he wrote about here. I have some of it underlined in my book. So I want to point out what he shares here in mathematical analysis of, the collisions from the big, Hadron Collider. We're all aware of that one in Geneva, Switzerland, and all the many things they've discovered, such as the God particle in 2012. And here's a little bit of what he wrote here, which is out of my book, which I put in my own words. And so it's not a quote from him. I wrote this in my own words, but it's exactly what he was saying. And it says here, another part of this is describing analysis of the particle collisions and what the mathematics shows. This is just a little teeny part of what he's describing. That there's a lot more in my book, which I can point out to you very quickly here. As you can see, that goes all the way over to here, and so on and so forth. And it starts way, way back here on that. So he says here, another part of the D-world model is known as the Grundgillen structure, which was originally constructed to analyze and better understand the relationship between the varied states of the consciousness and subconscious mind in certain areas of psychology. In fact, the D-world mathematical model was made far more effective by making its superstructure from this G structure and gave greater position and opportunity for application in various fields. This more effective, refined D-world model consists of pages of extensive mathematical machinery that reveal exceptionally substantial evidence that this visible natural world is a small substructure of a much more sophisticated and elaborate invisible supernatural realm. What is shocking is that this refined D model clearly establishes that there are informational signals that are instantaneous rather than at the speed of light between standard D world particles, and that behind this there is a supernatural mastermind of infinite intelligence. In the supermind portion of these particles that identify a mastermind of exceptionally superior mental processes for the production of such highly sophisticated dimensions of existence, it becomes clear that this is far beyond any mere human or machine brain logical process to ever be able to produce. And that is, therefore, revealing a far superior intelligence. Now, there's not just Robert A. Harriman, which is one example that goes into this mathematical analysis. And by the way, there are other experiments that have clearly proven that there is instantaneous, not speed of light, qualities in the physical, I believe even in the physical dimension, yes. And I do have that also in my Kindle book here, which you can purchase on Amazon. I'm not sure exactly where that part would be with the particles that go instantly at that speed, but it's not really that important to know that, so I will not waste my time. Although you can see here how even the renowned astronomer here says, V.A. Firsoff said the universe, as seen by a neutral eye, would wear a very unfamiliar look. Our Earth and our Other planets would simply not be there. A neutrino brain might suspect our existence from certain secondary effects, but would find it very difficult to prove, as we would elude the neutrino instruments at his disposal. I'm not going to go on to all of these things here. I want to go to another point here, and that is a scientist by the name of Dr. Ron Pearson, who has taught at some of the most prestigious universities physics as a professor, and is also an exceptional person because he has, with that, great engineering skills that are related to jet engines and so on. And I have a video of his that I want to show you briefly here. So I'm going to bring that up now. That video of his, I shouldn't have minimized that actually. All I need to do is go to anything here, and I will bring up that video very quickly here on that. This is Dr. Ronald Pearson and what he has to say in this video.
How do these two worlds interrelate because there's an ether there? That's what we're interested in.
It fits in beautifully because what it shows is that this structure I'm speaking about, this filamentous structure, is very similar to the neural network of the human brain, only it's on a very much finer scale, even though it pervades the entire universe. So it has the potential to become intelligent. It also has the potential to become conscious. As soon as consciousness arose, then what I am saying is that the consciousness decided to create a matter system for its own ends. And it used the waves which it spontaneously generates to create a matter system. It does so by causing waves to implode from all directions and produce a little spike in the ether. This is a subatomic particle. And the whole thing is organized by waves. Now, this is very interesting because in quantum theory, particles, subatomic particles, the bits of the atom, sometimes behave as if they're particles, in other words, little tiny point masses, and sometimes they appear as waves spread out over a big area. And to this date, quantum physicists cannot explain how this can be. Explanations are given, I grant, but they're all nonsensical arguments, in my view. In fact, the physicists themselves say you cannot use common sense in the quantum domain. I'm saying that this new theory brings common sense back into play and shows that waves make the particles and sort this problem out. So this consciousness in the ether then deliberately designed a matter system so that life could exist of the kind we know. The matter system had to be capable of producing the chemistry, the involved chemistry on which life depends. It all had to be very carefully organized.
Almost like the beginning of evolution, as it were, in that way.
Yes. What I am saying is that a Darwinian kind of evolution took place not at first in the matter at all, but in the ether of space. Before matter ever existed, an evolution occurred.
Now, I could go on, and it's very interesting, but for time, you get the point. He goes on to emphasize that there is superior dimensions of existence, and that we're just in channel 22, and if you're in channel 23, you're not going to know anything about what's going on in channel 22. Okay, so much for that. Pardon me again. This gentleman here, Dr. Pearson, has invented what's known as the Big Breed theory, which has way less contradictions and problems, in fact, hardly any, as opposed to the Big Bang, which is filled with contradictions and problems. And now the James Webb Space Telescope, which is 100 times more powerful than the Hubble, has totally blown away many scientists, so that many of the big proponents, scientists that were big proponents of the Big Bang Theory, no longer believe in it. And those that are believing it are really scratching, holding on to the edge of the cliff, because it gets a little more and more bizarre to have that as an explanation, as they observe things that just totally were devastated of that Big Bang Theory in 11 points. I'm pointing these things out because drawing conclusions from mere physical observation is obviously not looking at all the evidence. And so I want to go on to point out to you the very great empirical evidence there is from this gentleman here. I mentioned, and I think before I do this, I want to say this. I mentioned that time and time again, we find people that have been dead, some for almost up to 2 hours, some for maybe just 5 minutes, but with no brain reading, totally no heartbeat. Time and time again, they describe details of what the doctors were saying and doing, what their friends were doing in the room next door, and what they were talking about, what their family was doing a mile away in the home. And these things have been verified over and over and over again when they were dead. In fact, what they discover is that their memory was so superior in this other dimension that they remember far more than they could in their normal physical state, because of all the details they tell the doctors and others, highly confirming another dimension. This cannot be explained scientifically to be just the chemistry change in the brain by any means. None of those explanations make intelligent common sense. So here we have these two, the cardiologists talking.
And as we were standing there, it had been at least 20 minutes. I don't know this exact time sequence, but it was close to 20, 25 minutes.
Right.
That this man recorded no heartbeat, no blood pressure, and the echo showing no movement of the heart, just sitting there. And all of a sudden we looked up, and the surgical assistant had just finished closing him, and we saw some electrical activity. And pretty soon the electrical activity turned into a heartbeat. Very slow, 30, 40 a minute. And we thought, well, that's kind of an agonal thing. And we see that occasionally, that the heart will continue to beat even though the patient can't generate a blood pressure or pump any blood. Well, pretty soon we look and he's actually generating a pressure. Now, we're not doing anything. I mean, the machines are all shut off, and we're stopped all the medicines and all that.
Right.
And so I start yelling, "Get anesthesia back in here!" and get the nurses. And to make a very long story short, without putting him back on cardiopulmonary bypass, the heart and lung machine and stuff, we started giving him some medicines, and anesthesia started giving him oxygen, and pretty soon he had a blood pressure of 80 and pretty soon a blood pressure of 100, and his heart rate was now up to 100 a minute. You know, he recovered and had no neurologic deficit. And for the next 10 days, 2 weeks, all of us went in and were talking to him about what he experienced, if anything. And he talked about the bright light at the end of the tunnel, as I recall, and so on. But the thing that astounded me was that he described that operating room floating around and saying, I saw you and Dr. Cattaneo standing in the doorway with your arms folded talking. I didn't know where the anesthesiologist was, but he came running back in. And I saw all of these post-its sitting on this TV screen. And what those were any call I got, the nurse would write down who called and the phone number and stick it on the monitor, and then the next post-it would stick to that post-it, and then I'd have a string of post-its of phone calls I had to make. He described that. I mean, there's no way he could have described that before the operation because I didn't have any calls.
No.
Right?
And he's sitting on, and he's lying on the, so he must have been floating.
He was up there.
Yeah.
He described the scene.
That's enough.
Things that there is no way he knew.
And this happens over and over and over again. This is empirical scientific evidence that evolutionists, atheists, are ignoring. That cannot be ignored or explained away. So it's easy to choose to want to believe something that allows us to stay in a certain womb of comfort because that's where our pride is, that's where we feel accepted, that's where our money and our security is, and so we're not willing to be birthed out of that womb. And then a new discovery comes along and threatens that. And so whenever there's new discoveries, the people that discover those things are persecuted. And it's a general principle even in every aspect of society where there's a gathering around certain beliefs and persuasions. And I'm not going to go on with that. Let us go on. There is another good number of examples that I have here. So we go on. And we have another one here that I just want to show you.
Pairing water with this before bed helps to shrink a swollen prostate overnight.
Sorry about that.
Major secular company out of Oxford, and I debated a guy with 3 earned doctor's degrees. He argued that NDEs didn't really occur, not in the objective realm. I argued they did, and I summarized evidential cases into, I summarized 300 evidential cases into 5 categories of data. So when someone says to me, what's your favorite, or what's the best, I'm saying, well, do you want a really highly evidenced case from inside the room? Because there's a couple skeptics who want them inside the medical room, then, or do you want them that I think are stronger, the ones that are at a distance, the ones that are on another floor of the hospital, or they're a mile away, or what about ones that are 100 miles away, where they report something that's verifiable? That's a distance one. How about NDEs in the blind, who only claim to see something while they're blind, but have not seen anything before or after the NDE? Now, keep in mind, every one of these, that doesn't make it evidential, because you could say, well, what if the blind person was hallucinating? Just keep in mind, all 300 of these are verifiable. In other words, they're in a state from which they can be thought to die if they don't get help, often quickly. But after we have a record saying they went down in the state, we have data that starts being reported from a half hour later, because they're out for, let's say, 2 hours. And we have data that starts and ends while they're still out. And some of these, one source alone has dozens of cases where there's no no measured brain or heart activity. And there are dozens in that category. What do we do with these? So then there's a couple other categories too, which I call Twilight Zone categories that are really weird, but highly evidenced. So there's 5 categories altogether, 300 evidential cases that I know of. Depends on what the person wants. One of my favorite ones, I'll just tell you 2 real quickly, and you can see how these sound. They're both very brief. In one case, a lady had a near-death experience. She reported being up above her body, and in the room was a medical device that was pretty tall. You wouldn't walk up to it and look on top of it because you can't see on top of it. But she was up above it. And as soon as she came to, as soon as this thing was over, she said, I have obsessive compulsive disorder. I have OCD. And she said, whenever I see large numbers, I instinctively memorize them. And there's a riveted number on top of that machine, an ID number, I guess, for where this machine is in the hospital. And the number is 6730233, and she gives 12 numbers. She tells the nurse to write the number down, and the nurse does. And a while later, they moved the machine. Before they did it, they sent a guy up there on a ladder who read the number. She got it exactly right. And she told the nurse as soon as she came to. So it wasn't hearsay. It wasn't a year later. Wasn't even a week later. And it was verified. Now, get this. I know, well, through a good friend who did the research, I know of the nurse who took the number. And she was so impressed when the number was confirmed. She made the comment that it was the most impressive thing that she'd ever experienced in her entire life.
That's just one example. He's got many more. I'm not going to, for time, go into it. It's enough to see that there is the evidence here that is without mistake. Very irrefutable evidence. And we can go on. And so I want to point out something here that we do not want to become those that are self-serving unto ourselves. So many organizations start out with a pure motive, but then in the end, they become corrupt, and they're only interested in themselves and making money. It's just the tendency of human beings to become corrupt over time, especially in leadership. And I'm not going to go into it beyond that. And so we need to be those that are bold and are willing to come out of the womb of anything that is putting blinders on us from really being open to all the scientific evidence. We need to have that attitude like Star Trek. Boldly going where no man has ever gone before, right? Being open to the truth. So, I'm just pointing these things out because I think it is important. In fact, I did write something in an article, which I guess I will bring up after all here. So I bring it up now. And I said repeatedly, hierarchy that has formed around an invention, discovery, theory, or measure of truth in time ends up serving man's self-interest rather than its true purpose and conviction. This violates integrity, conscience, and liberty and breeds mistrust, which evolves towards control through fear that often leads to oppressive tyranny. The more of us as individuals that are willing to pay the price to put reality and truth before our own selfish interest, the more we will be liberated out of the darkness of destructiveness towards the light, filled with lasting meaning and fulfillment. In regards to this corrupting principle in the governance of man, I'm inventing a new word. The first part of this word uses the word narc, from the word narcissism meaning self-admiration. Excessive self-admiration and self-centeredness. The last half of this word uses the word agogry, from the Greek word agogos, meaning leader. This creates the new word narcagogry. It would be defined as leadership of individuals, organizations, or governments that have over time become an end unto themselves by deviating to seek their own interests and survival above that of whom they were meant to honestly serve or present their genuine conviction to. Thus, this organization or individual has narcagogued or has become a narcagogry. The theory of evolution in today's public educational systems in North America and Europe and in most parts of the world, in my judgment, has certainly become a narcagogry. It doesn't seem that they're really open to all the evidence. And so I want to point out something in regards to this, and that is a publication of a book called The Mysterious Origins of Man that came out and became a popular bestseller book. And also there was as a result a movie produced about that book. And here is the movie that you can watch. And what happened was that the people that I think I have the it right here. I'm going to go down here to get this little statement here. Because of the powerful impact, The Mysterious Origins of Man, that is, this movie, NBC TV special documentary, that's who made the movie, had on the public around this book, it moved the scientific community to lobby the Federal Communications Commission to find and censor NBC just because they were showing evidence that went against their theory. Come on. The Mysterious Origins of Man, the History Channel. It is obvious that this then exposed the cover-up of these establishment scientists and threatened their exclusive monopoly on intellectual authority, funding, and social prestige. So I think it is important to keep that in mind in our observations. And so here is this video. And I can't play it. I'm just showing you the video here for yourself. You can look it up on the internet and watch it. I'll just play a little teeny bit of it.
The plateau made a startling discovery which seems to confirm this ancient age of the Sphinx.
In very simple terms, the first thing that one realizes when you look at the pyramids of Giza is that they're designed along astronomical principles. We're finding that the astronomy is leading us to conclude.
Discovery is that it's based on a speculative leap in which two pieces of evidence are put together in a way that's not really warranted.
At the end,
Dubois discovered a very primitive-looking ape-like skull cap, and he discovered this thigh bone about 40 feet away. He said, well, obviously they must belong to the same creature. And that creature walked erect like a human being and had an ape-like skull, so that must be a missing link, the Pithecanthropus ape man. So maybe you had a big ape and a human being living together in Java about 1 million years ago. The important point to make about the Java man discovery is that it's based on a speculative leap in which two pieces of evidence are put together in a way that's not really warranted.
So
at the end of his life.
Okay, so there you go. That's another example. and one can go on and show the evidence. I want to now go up and talk for a minute here. I want to propose this also. You know, the theory of evolution, if it's applied to an infinite past or even an extremely long past, what would be the result? Well, certainly it wouldn't be that evolution just happened in this physical realm. Obviously, sexual reproduction is a very highly complex and highly designed system in the physical realm. This would be before any sexual reproduction, and this evolution would have probably taken place even before time existed, or in some other dimension. But if you apply the theory of evolution to an infinite past, or an extremely long past, you would get the maximum of what evolution would bring forth, the apex. What would it be? It certainly wouldn't be a bunch of creatures. Because the chances, according to big mainframe computers, of anything evolving is virtually nil. So if something did evolve, it would be one thing. And of course, the big breed theory by Ron Pearson does go along these lines to say there was this evolution in another dimension. And what I would say is this, that it would have evolved to such a state and be so great that it would have power over time and space and time and chance and all of these things, so that it would have swallowed up the need for such a process of evolution to exist in the first place. And it makes sense that ultimate order is always greater than disorder, and therefore that ultimate order would have always existed and not disorder. That the infinite past would have been a state of ultimate order. And I will describe in detail what could only be possibly what this ultimate order could be at the end of this video. And you will find that exceptionally unique and original with myself, and very interesting with the way I describe it in a very scientific way. So now I want to go into some other evidence that is very amazing evidence as well. And so we're going to go to that evidence, and I will bring it up in a moment here. We are going to consider what is inside ourselves. And so here we go. This is amazing.
Guys, do your
Now,
daughter a favor this year by getting her a
sorry about the advertising.
unique gift that she'll treasure forever. It says, "To my daughter, never forget that I love you."
And what's discovered inside the simplest of living things is astounding indeed. As PhD geneticist Michael Denton described, to grasp the reality of life as it has been revealed by molecular biology, we must magnify a cell 1,000 million times until it's 20 kilometers in diameter and resembles a giant airship large enough to cover a great city like London or New York. What we would then see would be an object of unparalleled complexity and adaptive design. On the surface of the cell, we would see millions of openings like the portholes of a vast spaceship, opening and closing to allow a continual stream of materials to flow in and out. If we were to enter one of these openings, we would find ourselves in a world of supreme technology and bewildering complexity. Now, part of that bewildering complexity is our topic for conversation, kinesin. Kinesin proteins aren't living things. Rather, they're a family of miniature motor proteins inside living things that transport cargo around inside cells and are remarkably humanoid in appearance. Having two legs that allow them to walk along roadways inside cells and two arms that allow them to carry packages full of important cargo, they're like the postal delivery people, but on a mind-bogglingly microscopic scale. At only 7 billionths of a meter long, They consist of, utilize, and synchronize with an incredibly complex array of microbiotechnology that rivals the most sophisticated feats of engineering that humans have ever achieved. Now, there are many different types of kinesin and kinesin-related proteins, each with different specifications and functions that have been discovered in various organisms from yeast to humans. But the following example is a very basic scientific description of what a typical kinesin does and why it does it. Inside life forms, proteins and other needed parts must be delivered to specific places within the cell at precise times. Now, if the needed part is a protein, for example, a manufacturing plant called a ribosome receives blueprints for the part from the nucleus. The information is stored in the nucleus on a strand of DNA, but the blueprint is sent in the form of an RNA copy of that section of the DNA. Now, this is obviously a complex coordinated effort, as something must first access the creature's DNA library, unzip it at the...
I don't want to spend too much time. I just emphasizing and showing the reality of design, that to say it's an appearance of some evolution, to say that this is just the appearance of design, is not intelligent at all. And it's not common sense to draw such a conclusion, when it is obvious that this is so hot, way beyond anything that man can ever create, such as AI technology that man boasts, like computers are going to take over the world and so on. AI technology is like child's play compared to what's in one little cell and in all our cells that are so small you can't even see. How can you explain that as evolution without becoming, obviously, to anyone with common sense and intelligence, self-denying of what is real before you? We go on. And there's more, and I can just play another one here quickly.
Cells. From the perspective of data storage, DNA is very efficient, since it requires the least amount of material to code for the 20 amino acids. A pinhead-sized piece of DNA has the same amount of information as 25,189-page paperback books. A stack of these books would stretch 920 times the distance from the Earth to the Moon. If you put all the DNA molecules present in your body end to end, the DNA would reach from the Earth to the Sun and back over 600 times. In fact, some scientists are attempting to use DNA's incredible capacity for storage to store data. According to Extreme Tech, a bioengineer and geneticist at Harvard Wyss Institute successfully stored around 700 terabytes in a single gram of DNA.
Okay, enough is enough to get the point on this matter. This is way beyond anything that can be explained as happening by evolution, because all of this complex machinery in cells is irreducibly complex. It means that if you take one little part out of it, like a mousetrap, the mousetrap won't work. It's not something that could evolve. There's no rational explanation. We can go on, and I want to show you something even that will blow you away about DNA. This is really going to blow you away, and I don't think many of you know about this next video.
And the natural frequency of the planet. And in 2011, groundbreaking research suggested something even more impressive, that Schumann resonance could be connected to the beginnings of life itself. The breakthrough came at the hands of Luc Montagnier, the Nobel Prize-winning scientist who first discovered the HIV virus. The professor was conducting water memory experiments, examining how water could retain a memory of substances that had previously been dissolved in it, when he stumbled upon something that would challenge the very principles of science. All life comes from life. This is a fundamental principle of science, and one which has never been violated in any experiment. Life can only exist where life has existed before. And the mechanism for this has always been understood to be a material one, such as egg and sperm, or spore and cell division. But Luc Montagnier's experiments have offered a very different hypothesis. The professor showed that DNA sequences, the very building blocks of life, communicate with each other in water by emitting low-frequency electromagnetic waves. Even when the DNA was kept in separate test tubes, the professor still recorded electromagnetic communication between them. How sophisticated could this communication be? Well, Luc Montagnier showed they are able to organize nucleotides, the ingredients which actually make up DNA, into brand new DNA. Science has combined these ingredients countless times before, but in no experiment have they ever been able to recreate the spark of life and transform nucleotides into actual DNA, not without DNA already being present. Life, after all, can only exist where life has existed before. But in Luc Montagnier's experiments, the DNA had been completely filtered from the water. Yet new DNA was still formed. Just how was this possible? How had Luc Montagnier managed to achieve what no other scientist could, and create life where no life was present?
So that's enough to get the point there. Now this totally blows evolution out of the water. DNA is in one test tube. In the other test tube, next to that test tube, there's no DNA at all. And yet the DNA sends a frequency into the test tube where there is no DNA and recreates DNA. And man can't even create DNA when he's got pieces of the DNA that he could put together. Can't even do that properly. And this is created out of nothing. This, again, reveals an intelligence that is far superior to man, anything man can even come close to, and even scratch the surface on. And so this is all the evidence that should definitely be considered, and is not. But there's even more evidence that's even more amazing from DNA that reveals that man is only 6,000 years old. And if you don't believe me, here's the video.
If you're an older adult wanting to learn guitar, I have a question for you. What's the difference between a guitar beginner?
And they would say creation science isn't testable. So, despite all the good arguments against evolution, the good arguments for design, all this evidence makes sense from a creationist perspective. No, not good enough, they've said. Again, this isn't my view, this is what they're saying. The whole reason I bring it up, why they demand testable predictions, is to show you that no longer applies. Replacing Darwin put testable predictions in print, specifically with regards to human history. I'll read you this sentence, it's a mouthful, and I'll explain it. My model suggests that the history of civilization can be read off nuclear DNA differences among the peoples of the globe, and on a timescale consistent with the young Earth creation model. Mouthful of way of saying, like I said earlier, if the Bible is true, if mankind restarted after the flood with just 8 people, and the pre-flood world was destroyed by the flood, then that means the history of civilization is all post-flood. We all come from these 8 people. And you should be able to see the echo of this, the Mongol invasion of Eastern Europe, the migration of Central Asian peoples into Europe in the Middle Ages, all that in our DNA. And you'll miss all that if you stretch it out over hundreds of thousands of years. And I said specifically the Y chromosome differences, the male inherited DNA. That's what this book represents. It's the answer to 40-year-old long arguments against creation science. This book fulfills testable predictions that I made several years ago and makes many more. It sets about a gigantic new research program of connecting every people group back to specific men in Genesis 10, of uncovering the history of so many other people groups on Earth, of confirming other known events of history in this DNA sequence. Or to put it in a nutshell, if you look at the history of the attacks on Genesis, because again, the mainstream account is in direct contradiction to the biblical account. Christians have sought to defend Genesis. This book doesn't defend Genesis because this book doesn't play defense. It's biblical authority on offense. We've made testable predictions, we've fulfilled testable predictions, and we've got a whole new research program that makes even more. This is science advancing. This is a whole new era of the creation evolution debate, new volumes to be written as a result of this. I'd say we're witnessing the dawn of a new era in the creation evolution debate. So if you're thinking about buying Traced, these are some of the reasons why I'd say this is a book. Or forget the buying, why this research matters to every person, because every person can connect their history to specific men in Genesis 10. We can find the line of the major players in major world religions, Islam, Judaism, Christianity. Here's the genealogical echo, and it actually may get me in some trouble with some of the Muslim community, because right now we don't see a clear echo of Ishmael, from as best I can tell. Might still be out there, but there's toes that will likely be stepped on as a result of this. Your ancestry can be connected back to these men. We're writing new volumes on the history of peoples, new events in prehistory, so-called prehistory, post-battle, pre-written records. This rewrites race and ethnicity, has new application submissions, has dramatic implications for how we think about the age of the earth. And again, 6,000 years being almost a swear word. Let's avoid it. No, this is a very strong argument for it. And this marks the dawn of a new era in the creation evolution debate. This book does all that. Again, organically connect.
I'm not going to go into more until you see again very strong evidence in this area of genetics and what is in the cell, and how it can be traced back in time now. So one has to have an open mind to these things. Now I want to go on to another area here that people have assumed, and that is the age of the earth. The age of the earth is, there's over 104 young earth indicators that reveal that the earth is between 6,000 and 10,000 years old. And these young earth indicators, and maybe I should bring myself up for a moment, these young earth indicators are based on far less presumptions than the dating methods used to bring forth long ages. And again, this is another big topic. They put these long ages into their books even before they had these dating methods. And then they used these dating methods to fit in to what they wanted. And so they base things on many presumptions that, they measure dating by uranium decaying into lead and so on, and assume that when the molten material came out of the earth, that it only had uranium in it. But who's to say it didn't already have lead? And so, for example, when Mount St. Helens exploded, they did their dating methods there, and it said that this material was millions of years old. It was only, or a million years old, I forget what the exact long date it was. But, anyhow, they, found that it was only 30 years old. It was actually only 30 years old, and yet here it's dating 1,000,000 some odd years. So, you know, and here there are all these young Earth indicators. And so if you go to the website here, which is at creation.com, Age of the Earth, you can look at 104 of these young Earth indicators, and they have them all listed down here. DNA in ancient fossils, the Lazarus bacteria, the decay in human genome due to multiple slightly harmful mutations, and so on. And there's a whole list of these young Earth indicators here. And the evidence that the Earth is not millions of years old and that man isn't 100,000 years old, the evidence is very significant and strong. And people say, oh, what about the ice cores? Oh, the ice cores? Again, you're trying to fit evolution into the ice cores. So you will do everything in your power to make sure that that is interpreted to be millions of years old. But I want you to see what it says here about the ice cores.
So it's very, very convincing.
A lot of people think that you can just count those layers in the ice core like we count tree rings. Is that true or not true?
In the upper part of the core, you can count the layers. But when you get down further, where they've thinned so greatly, and there's such an incredible difficulty in interpreting all the various information, you cannot count them as individual rings, particularly visually. And even the chemical compositions and the oxygen 18-16 ratios and so on, there's a tremendous controversy on that. So basically, you can estimate it for one ice age, but it doesn't go back to hundreds of thousands of years, and you cannot count them as annual layers. There's too much difficulty in interpreting the record.
So it seems we have some real differences in the assumptions associated with how we count those layers.
Well, if you had a considerable amount of precipitation following the Genesis flood, you would have had a lot more precipitation than is normally assumed. Down in the middle of the core, things get so thin that you can't really interpret it correctly. The amplitude from the oxygen 18-16 ratios are almost impossible to interpret in terms of annual layers. And in fact, these layers can be easily interpreted as storm layers, not annual layers. So that if you assume that, say you had a storm every 3 days, you would have 120 of those layers in 1 year, not just one layer. And so these interpretations are very inaccurate. And so you can't assume that in each individual layer is an annual layer. It's not hundreds of thousands of years. It could be just a few thousand years.
You love this work, don't you?
No.
So there you go. Again, example of example. Things that are stated as fact that are far from fact. That the earth is millions of years old, and there's a lot more evidence, of course. And so I go on in this section to show some of that evidence. And so here is the next video on that. And I'm just going to double check and make sure.
Ignition sequence start. Engines on.
Get this advertising on.
How many
I just want to double check on something here for a moment. Make sure everything's working proper. Wow. It's not minimized. Sorry about that. We'll make sure it is minimized. And so here we go.
Etc. We went to 60 museums, and Debbie took 60,000 photographs. Wow. At the dinosaur dig sites, we found examples from every major animal phyla living today, buried with the dinosaurs, and these animals look the same.
Say that again. It's incredible.
At the dinosaur sites, we found fossils, examples of modern animals from every major animal phyla buried with the dinosaurs, and they look the same.
You started out not knowing if there would be any.
Zero.
And then you found them in every group in the same strata with the dinosaurs.
Yeah, and it's worse than that. Not only did we find this for animals, then for the plants, we found examples from every major plant division of plants living today, buried alongside the dinosaurs, fossilized, and they look the same as the modern plants.
So you photograph fossils from dig sites and museums, and you realize that modern animals live with dinosaurs. That seems too simple.
You know, Don, there is a rule in science called the rule of simplicity or parsimony or Occam's razor that says the simplest explanation for a series of problems is usually the correct explanation. So yes, it is very simple.
I love this phrase, simply profound. What you have found is profound by its simplicity. That here are these animals that are just like they are today, and they were there then, therefore evolution didn't happen.
According to the fossils that I look at, evolution did not occur. The plants look the same, the animals look the same. Sure, some of the animals went extinct, like dinosaurs, pterosaurs, but extinction is not evolution. The animal fauna has not changed.
Look what he found about bats.
Scientists have...
That's enough on that one. And then you go on here, and there's more on this. What about the dinosaur tissues? That's on this as well.
It's not easy to struggle with substance use, but with the help and support you need,
how many different places is there?
We went to 60 museums, and Debbie took 60,000 photographs.
Wow.
At the dinosaur dig sites, we found examples from every major animal phyla living today.
Okay, that's the wrong one. I will get the right one right here. Okay. This was supposed to be for dinosaur tissues, but it doesn't seem to be. But that's okay. We'll try this one instead.
Natural history museums have some of the most amazing fossil collections in the world.
Okay. So with this one here, what we'll do is I know where it is more or less on here. So I'm going to go there, right here.
Madagascar, Alaska, and Montana. Even the founder of the largest dinosaur museum in the world admitted that they suddenly appeared together by creation on the 6th day of Creation Week. So much for dinosaur ancestors and transitions. Over the last few decades, scientists have been discovering soft tissues in dinosaur bones. We're talking about over 50 peer-reviewed secular science journals that have now reported 14 bioorganic materials found in dinosaur bones. They're finding blood cells, blood vessels, connective tissue, and even collagen, which has a maximum shelf life of just tens of thousands of years, with some stretching it out to a maximum of 900,000 years. Either way, with a maximum shelf life of less than 1 million years, what's collagen doing in dinosaur bones that are supposedly 65 million years old? Many dinosaur bones are even found unfossilized in places like Madagascar, Alaska, and Montana. Even the founder of the largest dinosaur museum in the world admitted that usually most of the original bone is still present in a dinosaur fossil. Just look at this soft, pliable dinosaur tissue. This type of bioorganic material has been found in the bones of several different dinosaur species. It sure doesn't look like a 65 million year old rock, does it? Even Charles Darwin said, as by evolution theory, innumerable transitional forms must have existed. Why do we not find them embedded in countless numbers in the crust of the Earth? And why is not every geological formation and every stratum full of such intermediate links? Geology assuredly does not reveal any such finely graduated organic chain. And this is the most obvious and serious objection which can be urged against the theory.
And we go on. So there you have more and more and more evidence. Contrary, that shows not long ages, but the contrary. There isn't long ages. This gets even more amazing. All of these discoveries. We go on here to the next video.
Today, we are excited to introduce Divi Teams, a new foundation.
This hammer was discovered in June 1936 by Frank and Emma Hahn. Their son later became a professor at Ohio State University. We were able, with the help of benefactors, to purchase this some years ago. When they first discovered it on a piece of new property they had just purchased, they simply saw a rock, concretionary rock, that was embedded in the bedrock. They got it out. There was nothing but a stick sticking out. Their son chipped the top of it off. This is a portion of the overlay material. You can see the groove where it fit. Now, the overlay material covered all of it. This overlay material consists of nucleopolisapod shells, which are assigned an age from Silurian to present, and again, that is of no great significance, but the hammer itself is. A portion of the handle is colified, indicating that there was pressure and compression. There's no rust on it. This is char. I took this particular artifact to Battelle Laboratory in Columbus, Ohio. We used the same laboratory, the same instrument, the same technician to analyze this as analyze the original moonstones that were retrieved by Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin. In the research at the laboratory, they did a streaming microprobe elemental analysis, and they discovered that the iron, the hammerhead, is 96.6% iron, 0.74% sulfur, and 2.6% chlorine. You can't do that. You can compound chlorine with dust particles of iron, but not with a lattice of iron. Whoever fabricated this instrument had knowledge superior to our best physicists of the day. But I think one of the more intriguing facts about it is this little area that shines bright is where the son of Frank and Emma Hahn, when he first removed the overlay material, took a file, seared down through it to see what it was made of. It was 76 years ago, and where he filed, it is not rusted in 76 years. I received a call from the lab at a major university, and the spokesman said, "We've just watched a documentary that you released on the hammer, the London artifact. And in our opinion, it is a genuine pre-flood artifact," he said. I said, "How do you know?" He said, "Because where it was seared, if it does not rust, that means there's iron oxide, FeO, on it." He said, "You see the brown char, that's iron oxide, FeO, Fe2O3 or Fe3O4, which is a dirty brown." And he said, "That's because of the radicalization of ultraviolet radiation." He said, in the pre-flood atmosphere, most of that ultraviolet radiation was filtered out. And in the laboratory, we can generate straight FeO by removing most of the ultraviolet radiation and increasing the humidity slightly. And he said, the FeO forms on the surface of the iron and it remains permanently bright like silver. I think perhaps he has a point. This certainly appears to be a genuine pre-flood artifact. Either way, finding this artifact in rock that is assigned an age of 140 million years not only challenges evolutionary theory, not only disrupts evolutionary theory, but it devastates evolutionary theory.
So there we go again. And I will show you even more amazing evidence than that. Right here. Again.
Make your Canadian small business stand out with a .ca domain. It's easy.
We have the original O.W. Willett print, a Cretaceous rock. A series of 6 prints were found in the mid-1950s. And here we have a pterodactyl print laterally, and we have that being stepped on by a human footprint 11.5 inches in length. In addition to that, from the Permian, we have a large human footprint. The question is, are these genuine? Spiral CAT scan technique has been used on all of these artifacts, demonstrating that through the rock, the signals that we receive show compression, density, and show the movement of the foot. These are genuine. From the rock that is assigned an age, according to evolutionary theory, of 110 million years, to rock that is assigned an age 225 million years. And then we have the Meister print, an original sandal print in the Cambrian rock that, according to evolution, is assigned an age of 650 million years. It is a human sandal print with wear on the heel, stitching around the side, trilobite pressed into the toe area, and the overlay material shows a trilobite compressed as well. In addition to that, we have a human handprint from Palo Pinto County in rock that is assigned an age of 110 million years. We have the recorded thumb print and the recorded print of the finger and fingernail and the thumbnail as well in the rock that hardened from the mud. In addition to that, from the Carboniferous period, from the time of the coal, we have this cup that, according to evolutionary theory, is in material that's supposed to be 400 million years old. In addition to that, we have the iron hammer, the London artifact from London, Texas, in rock that's supposed to be 110 million years old. All of this is symbolized by the icon of the museum, which is the Delk print, an 11.5-inch human footprint being intruded by an Acrocanthosaurus dinosaur footprint. We have the spiral CAT scans demonstrating that the human footprint is genuine and the dinosaur footprint is genuine. How does this disrupt evolutionary theory?
Well,
according to the theory of evolution,
pretty obvious, isn't it? Pretty obvious. So again, we see the evidence to be very strong and overwhelming, really, that devastates the theory of evolution that people want to believe in. And we go on. And I've already told you about the movie The Mysterious Origins of Man. Also points out such things as this and other things. Now, people say, oh, there couldn't have been a worldwide flood. But the evidence for a worldwide flood is actually very strong and overwhelming. And so I want to just point some of this evidence out to you right now as well. I have written this here, and this is from some of my own writing, but what is underlined in yellow, I will read some of it. It says here, actually, I'll start from the beginning. There is 138 similar flood accounts from tribes around the world. Many of these tribes and ancient civilizations that have traditions and records of God destroying the world by a flood because of man's wickedness. Within the first decade of the 1900s, before the influence of the West was in most parts of the world, anthropologists were seeking out remote tribes around the world in order to record their oral traditions. They were diligent to be certain these tribes had no influence from other cultures or from the very few missionaries that we're just at the beginning of a massive spread around the world. Out of the various books that publish these oral traditions, there is a massive 3-volume work, Folklore by Sir James Fraser, published in 1918, that brought all this work together. It includes 138 flood accounts from all parts of the world that have striking parallels with the biblical account of a worldwide flood. There are 7 major points on which these accounts almost all, without exception, agree on. First, there was a moral cause for the flood by intelligent beings. Second, that one man received advance notice of the flood by a god or an animal. Third, there was universal destruction of the human race and of all living things by water. Fourth, that some kind of vessel was used to provide deliverance and shelter. Fifth, a seed of mankind is preserved to perpetuate the human race. Sixth, that animals played a specific role by warning of the flood or by indicating when the waters abated and there was dry land. Seventh, that only a few that were personally warned and responded actually escaped. And then it goes on to show that not only are there those flood accounts, but many more from many cultures around the world, such as in Europe, the Greeks, Welsh, Icelandic, Lithuanian, and Finnish legends. Asia has the Persian, Chinese, Burmese, Filipino, and Hindu legends. North America has the Alaskan Eskimos, Algonquins, Iroquois, Hurons, Apaches, and it goes on. I don't need to list the whole thing for you. The evidence is obviously overwhelming. And here is where, no, that's not it. And you can also see where this book is right here. So I bring it up now. And this is the book right here, which is at archive.org/details folklore in the New Testament volume. You can take a look at it right here. And you can download this work yourself for free as a PDF or whatever. I did it myself. The evidence is overwhelming. Now, I want to point out also how there's been deliberate forgeries. And so here we're going to look at some deliberate forgeries. First of all, of the embryo. Did I click the right one there? Hold on there. Maybe this is it. I want to get the one on the embryo right here.
Process happens in the womb. There's no evidence for that, is there?
Absolutely not. Yet, on the screen, you'll notice a picture that is probably very familiar to a lot of the viewers out there. This one was drawn by a fellow by the name of Ernst Haeckel, and basically put these embryos, he would say, suggest evidence for evolution.
I remember that from my 8th grade science textbook, by the way.
It's still very, very popular in textbooks. The way we read it, if you look down here at the bottom, this would be a fish, a salamander, a turtle, a chicken, a pig, a couple of mammals, and finally over here at the end we have a human at 3 different embryological states. His point being that early on, up here at this top row, he would say that all creatures, whether it be a fish, a salamander, a human, that were basically all the same. I mean, if you look across there, there's not a whole lot of difference. He, in fact, said that his turning point in his thinking was when he read Charles Darwin's book on the origin of species. And yet we know today Ernst Haeckel lied. He actually forged those images I just showed you. On this particular screen, you'll notice Haeckel's embryos are at the top, and the real picture is there at the bottom.
In fact, Hegel was disciplined as a professor for lying, right?
Yes, he was. In fact, the story goes that he was kicked out of the University of Jena. You know, we've known literally for centuries now he lied in his pictures, and yet they keep showing up.
So who's the bigger liar? The man who drew the pictures in the first place knowing they weren't true, or the people who have continued to perpetuate the lie to our children when they knew it wasn't true?
That's right. And even evolutionists admit it. and Natural History magazine in the year 2000, Stephen Jay Gould, very well-known evolutionist, he commented on Ernst Haeckel's embryos. I want you to look at what he said. He said, "We should therefore not be surprised that Haeckel's drawings entered the 19th century textbooks, but we do, I think, have the right to be both astonished and ashamed by the century of mindless recycling that has led to the persistence of these drawings in a large number, if not majority, of textbooks."
That phrase, century of mindless recycling of lies.
Yes.
You know, we did a show, another show on indoctrination, and it just says to me, you know, if you're looking for truth, you don't reproduce lies.
Right.
But if you're trying to perpetuate a theory for which you have no evidence, then you don't care if it's true. You just care if kids believe it.
That's right.
And that's what they're doing now.
That's right. Sir Arthur Keith, in commenting on embryology, he said it was expected that the embryo would recapitulate the features of its ancestors from the lowest to the highest forms in the animal kingdom. Now that the appearance of the embryo at all stages is known, the general feeling is one of disappointment. The human embryo at no stage is anthropod in appearance. The embryo of the mammal never resembles the worm, the fish, or the reptile. Embryology provides no support whatsoever for the evolutionary hypothesis.
So there you go. There's an example of forgery, but there's even an amazing, far greater example of forgery. Deliberate forgery. And I believe this is very important for people to see. And so here's the other one on forgery.
This, a technical disclaimer relating to the Nebraska man as being in the human lineage was issued. However, the mass propaganda served to build a mindset of man descending from lower life form. It served its evolutionary purpose. Now, here is a very popular publication. Look at it very closely, of course. There is at the bottom Ramapithecus, who has in the last 20 years been demoted to just being another ape. Australopithecus, just another ape, but Lucy is included in that. Homo habilis, that's just a catch-all for a bunch of fragments throwing human bones, ancient human bones, and lower primate bones all together. There is no skeleton involved. Sinoanthropus, and all they had was the report of some skulls in China. Nothing but a report. All the originals are gone. They were supposedly transferred to Germany. The originals are gone. There's no evidence. Yet, here they're publishing all of these in our descent. Pithecanthropus erectus was the Java man, turned out to also be, the skull was the kneecap of an elephant. But that's officially, you need to come for every one of the lectures this year and get all the facts. Hesperopithecus, I've heard of him. There he is walking quite upright. Who's Hesperopithecus? Nebraska man. What is he really? That's the tallest pig I've ever seen. Well, maybe that's a feral hog. That's the funniest looking pig I've ever seen in my life. That's just an ape face on a human body, a little long on the arms. The guy was a pig. You know what do you understand what I'm saying? We need the facts. The facts are not being presented. There is an agenda to disturb the human mind, cloud our past, and discredit the Word of God. That's what Charlie Boy intended to do. He said, I feel like I've murdered God, and he was proud of it. He literally wrote that he had murdered God. So there's Hesperopithecus. Next to him, Doug, can you read that guy? The one who's between Hesperopithecus, the pig man, and the Neanderthal, smarter than we are. Who's the guy in between? Eanthropus. Anybody ever hear of Eanthropus? who was Eanthropus? Right. Piltdown, Eanthropus dawsoni, the Piltdown man, a total fraud, known since 1953, and yet this charade parade is being carried in a lot of publications worldwide. Something's going on, something fishy in Denmark.
No kidding. No kidding. No kidding. So we see the evidence on how people want to believe a lie. It seems that that is really the reason for such beliefs. They're not facing reality. Now, Christopher Hitchens said that Mount Sinai was not a reality, wasn't true, wasn't found. That's a total lie, what he said. There's overwhelming evidence from Mount Sinai, and I'm going to show it to you for yourself. The first thing I'm going to show you, though, is not Mount Sinai. I'm going to show you the Red Sea crossing and the evidence of that. Here's the first video.
Beach where the waters opened up. We're standing at the exact spot.
Wow.
Yes, and the mountains of Saudi Arabia in the distance.
Did your knees get weak sitting there? Was it an awesome thing to behold?
It was quite incredible, yes, to be there. And so in the foreground, right in front of us here, is a melted beach where the sand and the stones were literally melted together like concrete.
Really?
This is not loose sand. This is a melted beach which the pillar of fire created when it stood here. So
separating the Egyptian army from the fleeing Israelites.
Yeah. So again, this is more evidence, that confirms the location here.
My goodness. Now, how did you find out about that?
I had heard about it, and then I saw it myself. So here it is. You see, this rock is just infused in with the sand and the little rocks there. And this is all hardened. This is like concrete.
That is amazing.
Jason here is stepping on it. It's very solid. This is a different area.
How did the locals explain this?
I asked the hotel owner was here with us that we know, and he says, I've never seen this before. He said his hotel's in a different area, but he was amazed at what he saw. So
well, there's the evidence right there. It's solid.
Right. And so a piece of it was broken off for us to look at. And you can see up close here, all the little rocks and the sand, they're melted together, infused by the pillar of fire. And this goes on for some ways. This isn't just one little spot. And so Ron Wyatt went scuba diving out there, and various things have been found in the water. You can see human femur bone that is coral encrusted, which would be something you would expect. And on the left here, we see a normal one. On the right, you see the coral-encrusted femur from one of the soldiers. On the top left, you see a human rib cage stuck in the coral.
Now, what about people who say, "Oh, this is table coral"?
It's not, because it has metal in it. And so here's a horse's hoof that's shriveled up when they took it out of the water. It's shriveled up. So again, we have horse parts, human parts.
What are we seeing here? What is this coral?
And so this is coral standing on an axle, and it has a raised center hub with spokes going outwards. Here's another round chariot with a raised center hub and then spokes going out, and it's got a round shape to it. Again, it's covered in coral.
Do some people say that these are just modern shipwrecks?
Some people have said that, but again, this agrees totally with the design of the chariot wheels. With a raised center hub and using metal detectors, there is metal in the center. There are spokes going out. This is a 4-spoke wheel with 3 spokes left. 4-spoke wheels, 6-spoke wheels, and 8-spoke wheels are found here. Of course, using the metal detector, like he's demonstrating here, all of the hubs here contain metal, and that is the design of the Egyptian chariot wheel with a metal center hub. Now here is a gold-plated wheel. There were 600 choice chariots used in the Exodus, we're told, so you would expect to find 1,200 chariot wheels here with gold, and this one is special. It's gold plated,
and 2 or 3 of these were found by Mr. Wyatt. Now we see a more shallow area where the Red Sea crossing took place. It's shallower here compared to the north and compared to the south. It's still deep. It has to be a deep area. It's 2,800 feet deep, but that gives you a 4% grade, which is manageable. Over in Saudi Arabia, you see the remains of the pillar that was found there on the Saudi Arabian side. It was cut down by the Saudi authorities. It had Hebrew writing on it. We don't know where it is. But there in the Saudi waters, Viveka Ponton went scuba diving, and she found this beautiful chariot wheel in the Saudi Arabian waters. So
one can go on with this, but you see the evidence of the Red Sea crossing right there. So that's the first thing, is that evidence. And then we go on, and we see the more. This one is just another video on the Red Sea crossing where they went down and saw more chariot wheels, so I'll skip that one. And we'll go to Mount Sinai.
The mountain is the front of Mount Sinai, and you can see in the distance the blackened peak of the mountain. Once again, the Bible says that the mountain was a smoke. It was on fire. And so the mountaintop here is blackened. When you walk up to the top of the mountain, several people have, you turn the stone over, the top of it's black, the bottom of it is brown.
Really?
So there's evidence that it was burned on top, and the natural color is on the bottom, and it's brown.
Now that answers a question I was going to ask, and you've already answered it, because I have heard a secondary theory that this is just a different type of rock. It's a black rock that happens to have this line right at a certain point near the peak.
Yeah, but that's not the case. Yeah, this is a burned mountaintop because underneath it, it is brown material. So it's actually a day hike to make it to the top of the mountain and to make it back down. Strenuous walk. But people have been up there and they've seen the blackened, burned.
And that is the tallest mountain in the area.
It is. The upper 2/3 of Saudi Arabia is the tallest of mountains, and that's another clue that ancient historians have said, that it was the tallest of mountains in Midian, and that's what it is.
Here it is from Josephus. We were just looking at that now. Josephus said that Mount Sinai was the highest of mountains in the city of Midian, which is just outside of Al-Bad.
Yes, Al-Bad is 15 miles to the south.
Okay.
And Al-Bad is where Jethro is from. On some maps, you'll see the name Jethro next to Al-Bad. And the caves of Moses are there also at Al-Bad.
And also Philo said that Mount Sinai was located east of the Sinai Peninsula and south of Palestine, which puts it again in this vicinity.
Again, we're in the correct location. So you have all these ancient historians identifying the site, and you have the Bible saying Mount Sinai in Arabia, Galatians 4. So it's pretty incredible. It's been lost for so many millennia, and yet here it is coming out near the end of time for a demonstration of truth for mankind. So Exodus 19, and Mount Sinai was altogether on a smoke, because the Lord descended upon it in fire, and the smoke thereof ascended as the smoke of a furnace, and the whole mount quaked greatly. My friend Aaron Sin was out there around 2003 with Tim Mahoney, and again you can see the blackened peak in the background, and at the base of the mountain, we'll see a little bit later, is the remains of an altar. Once again, fitting the biblical account. You can see a guardhouse on the right edge of this photo. They put a fence around the front of the mountain, and a guardhouse, and a sign telling people to stay away. This is an archaeological area. So the Saudi authorities are recognizing this as an archaeological site.
Well, having put that much effort into it, they know.
Yes.
They know darn well what this is.
Sure. And then another photo here from a distance further back from the mountain. You can see, again, the encampment area, and the left side of the photo in the distance, that's an area where Elijah's cave is. And here in the very center of the photo is Elijah's cave. It's in a shadow. It's in kind of the very center of the photo here.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, you can see it there.
Yeah. And he, Elijah, arose, he did eat and drink, and went in the strength of that meat 40 days and 40 nights unto Horeb, the mount of God, and he came thither unto a cave and lodged there. 1 Kings 19.
Now, how many people would catch on to that this is the same? Because we hear of Elijah's cave, but normally you wouldn't tie the two together. You wouldn't stop at Mount Horeb. Oh, yes, that's right. This is the same place. You know, it's funny that it's just all in the same area.
Everything matches here, you know, the biblical account. And this is taken from inside the cave, and we're looking out into the valley below. This is quite a photograph here.
Wow. Now, that is, there in the photo, you can see that's the Saudi government's buildings. Is it not?
Well, actually, those are Bedouin buildings out in the
Okay.
far distance, but just in front of that, toward the mountain.
That's enough on that one. And there's much more evidence on all of this here. So I'm giving you an example of solid, concrete evidence for Mount Sinai, for the Red Sea crossing, and also for the rock that split open and from which much water came to supply the children.
Our next slide here, we can see Tim Mahoney in the foreground, and in the background, you can see the split rock, the first split rock.
Yes, okay.
So we went from the second one back to the first one here. And of course, Tim Mahoney, he is with the website patternsofevidence.com. They're putting together a documentary on this and the Red Sea crossing. But you can see in the distance the split rock on top of a 300-foot tall hill. The split rock is 50 feet in height. It's a very prominent rock. Now, in Numbers 20:11, and Moses lifted up his hand, and with his rod he smote the rock twice, and the water came out abundantly, and the congregation drank, and their beasts also. So God provided for them. He gave them provision. And
water for 1 million people.
Yes.
And probably several million animals.
Probably 3 million people, plus their livestock. So some people have been able to make it over there. The country is closed. You cannot get a tourist visa. So to get into the country is very difficult. And then getting out to the site, you have to have permits usually just to get to that area. But here you can see the split rock where you can see a large amount of water erosion. A large amount of water erosion coming down from the rock. In the foreground here, you can see channels being cut into the rock. The water has eroded the rock to a smooth surface here.
And this is the rock that in modern Western times that Jim and Penny Caldwell, the Bedouin have always known this is here.
When God split it sure split, and then the water erosion coming up out of there, spewing up, it created more space probably in the rock, eroding it away. And you can see water erosion coming down from the rock.
Yeah, and even if you saw this and you were a skeptic and said, well, that rock has always been split, or it's a natural outcropping, and that erosion is wind erosion, well, you're not going to have wind erosion flowing down in a pattern similar to what water would create.
Yes, this is definitely water erosion coming down. Again, this is a desert area, very little rainfall at all out here, and yet all this water erosion you can see on the rocks coming down from this giant split rock. So God did provide water for them lovingly, even though they were impatient and rebellious, kind of like.
So, more and more evidence, and also there's other evidence there. They see even where the tabernacle was staked out at the foot foot of Mount Sinai. Pardon me. That's all there. There's also where the water came out of that rock, there's wells that were dug there where they were collecting the water, and those are still there. A little, holes made into the rock so the water would collect into little kind of cisterns. So here we see overwhelming evidence. And that documentary Patterns of Evidence is right here, which you can look up for yourself. It's at patternsofevidence.com, and they have in this movie a lot more evidence than just Mount Sinai. Patterns of Evidence shows all the evidence of much of the biblical history of the cities that were conquered, like Jericho and the land of Goshen in Egypt, and all kinds of archaeological evidence. It's just amazing in this movie, which you can purchase here. So you can take a look at all of those things and make up your own mind. And you can probably even see trailers of this here somewhere. But the evidence is overwhelming, and there's no time to go into it all, obviously. So that is mainly what I wanted to bring before you as the evidence. And now I want to share with you what is the most important of all. The last part of this video. Christopher Hitchens is saying, how could God be a good God and allow all of this terrible suffering in the world? And I want to thoroughly answer that question. And so I want to point out this, first of all, is that I first must define what love is. And before I define that, I want to define what truth is and love in a very scientific way. If you look up in various dictionaries the word truth, it basically means that which is real or reality. And so you look up the word reality or real in various dictionaries, and it basically is defined as that which is indestructible, immovable, and absolute. There's only one quality that could possibly be this. It has to be a quality that is not only the opposite of corruption and the opposite of the second law of thermodynamics, which is basically the same thing. Pardon me. It also must be a quality that is the destroyer of corruption. And there's only one quality that could be that. Only this quality could be what reality is, that which is immovable, indestructible, and absolute. And what is that quality? It is what can be summed up as an ultimate perfection and manifestation of love that is the very source of love. And so I must define what love is. The highest form of love is a quality that always chooses the highest lasting good over any lesser choice. It is also a quality that is self-originating, that is totally free and innate. It's not a machine. It's the opposite of a machine. It is self-originating. But it's a quality that always chooses the highest lasting good over any lesser choice, because any lesser choice as such would have a measure of corruption in it. But this love has such integrity and is so pure that, as it were, it is a blazing fire of judgment against all that is contrary to this quality, this highest quality, which is the highest form of love that always chooses the highest lasting good. It is a blazing fire of judgment against all that is contrary to good. It is the destroyer of corruption, because corruption is the destroyer of good. Now, the second law of thermodynamics is basically defined as that which is, when left on its own, always goes in the direction of disorder to greater and greater chaos. And obviously, when there is disorder and there is chaos, there is involved in that suffering. So, having defined love, I want to say this. God is love. The ultimate order, the ultimate reality, the one true eternal God is love. And therefore, he created beings that have the capacity to love, not machines, not robots, because that's not a high form of life. The highest form of pleasure and the highest form of life and enjoyment is only found in this quality that I'm defining as love. Now, I'm just defining the first aspect of this quality of love right now. So God would not create beings that are machines. Only beings that have the capacity to love would he create, and that would be beings that therefore are self-originating. And when you're self-originating, you make choices and you create your own destiny, and you are in a sense a miniature creator by your choices. Therefore, you are self-responsible because you are self-originating. Therefore, you cannot blame God for creating the devil or for suffering. Suffering is the result of being cut off from this ultimate reality. You're left on your own, therefore you are going in a direction that is destructive. The second law of thermodynamics. When you rebel against love, you will bounce off it, and there will be negative consequences that are destructive. Now, the other aspect of this love, this is the perfection of this love that I'm describing. But there's an ultimate aspect to this perfection of love. And it is represented in the positive symbol, which is formed by crossing out the negative symbol. The negative symbol represents an indestructible foundation. It represents cutting off all corruption. The positive symbol is formed out of that negative symbol. And it's basically that this love is so great and or ultimate in its perfection, in its integrity, in its purity, that it can, for creatures such as us, take our rebellion and absorb it on itself as a perfect substitutionary atoning sacrifice, so that we can choose to repent and be reconciled to God. Yes, God loved you so much that he suffered more than you, a mere creature. And he humbled himself more than you, a mere creature, on the cross. That might seem so far-fetched to some people that that could be so. But let me just say this. This love could only be this way to cause there to be a creation that could go on forever without corruption. Only this love that I'm describing could be entrusted with unlimited power, life, and authority without being corrupted by all of that life, power, and authority, or using life, power, and authority, ultimate life, power, and authority in a corrupt way. Only this love would not be corrupted by ultimate authority, power, and life, or abuse ultimate power, authority, and life. Only these two aspects of this love, the negative aspect and the positive aspect. Yes, God's love is that great. And that was a quality that was not just a capacity in God, but it was always in this ultimate order before the world was created, or even probably this galaxy, or this whole, all of this particular universe was created. This love has been experienced by many people. They have experienced being reconciled to God. But one thing I want to tell people is this. Some of you are saying, well, then you believe in three gods, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. No, we believe there is only one God. For God to rule in the three ultimate aspects of existence, he must be in three personages. And those three ultimate aspects of existence are beyond creation as the Father. The word Father means originator. Separate above and beyond creation, the Father, in personage. The Son is the full expression of the Father into the creation realm. The word Son basically means expression. And so, Jesus Christ is the one and only begotten Son of God into the creation realm to communicate with it and to experience it. And so to rule in the creation realm, you must be in personage, and so you are as the Son. And the third ultimate aspect of existence is omnipresence, filling all dimensions of existence and all planes of time that intersect with each other and run parallel with each other and so on. And so as the Holy Spirit, God is in omnipresence, in personage. And so those are the three ultimate aspects of existence. And to be in those three ultimate aspects of existence, you must be in conscious intelligence in it and over it. And that requires being in three personages. And in the Old Testament, the word for God in the original Hebrew, the first word, which in English is the word Lord God, which is often used in English, the word Lord in the original Hebrew is Yahweh, or Jehovah, Yahweh being more accurate. And it means the ultimate reality that is separate above and beyond creation and is referred to as the I am that I am. And the other word, the word Lord is that, and then the word that goes with that, God, in the original Hebrew is most often Elohim, which is literally the Almighty's. And that refers to the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. And we have many examples in the Bible, in the Old Testament, of Christ appearing. For example, in Genesis 18, Abraham is at his tent door, and there's three men that are standing a little distance ahead of him. They look very majestic, I suppose. He bows before them and says, "Can I make you a really good meal?" He gets his servant to prepare a wonderful meal for them. They all eat. And he addresses the leader of those three majestic, actually angels. He addresses the leader, although they appear human, as Yahweh, the most sacred name for God. So there is Abraham talking to God. Who would that be? That would be Jesus Christ before he came into this world by incarnation as a babe. And so, Jesus Christ, having the perfect being of God, that quality of love, was in total union with the Father and resisted all temptation without sin, and as it were, carried the first man Adam, in whom the whole human race existed, as it were, through his obedience and union with Father. He carried that first man Adam to the cross where he was nailed. And so he becomes the second Adam, Jesus Christ. He could absorb that judgment. Yes, he loved you enough that his body was broken unto death, and he suffered, and his blood was shed for you, so that you could choose to cry out from the depths of your being and say, "God, be merciful to me, a sinner. Cleanse me of all my sin. Become the love center, the treasure of my life. I choose to make you my love slave, the Lord of my life, and my Savior." And when you do that, you really mean it, you will have a genuine experience of God coming into your being. And as Christ said, whoever believes with their life into me, out of their innermost being will flow rivers of living water. It says of the children of Israel that they hewed out for themselves broken cisterns that could hold no water. But the truth is likened unto a diamond cup, where there is no cracks, that is totally whole, that can contain unlimited life and power and channel it onto good without corruption, that ever enlarges in creativity forever and ever. And God's ultimate purpose is that he would have a corporate bride that he could be married to, of myriads of creations from the myriads of creations that he has created in many parts of the universe and distant galaxies and so on, in a place in heaven. There is no love that can be imagined that is greater than this love, or that could exist that is greater than this love. And those that have experienced being dead for a long time, highly verified as dead, such as Dean Braxton. Braxton is spelled Braxton. You can look him up on the internet. Just type in NDE, standing for near-death experiences, and Dean Braxton. When he stood before Jesus Christ, and there's others like Dale Black that experienced the same thing, they said the love was so intense. In fact, in that other dimension that is so much superior to this dimension, the love was so intense and great that there's no way it can be described in any earthly language in this very inferior physical dimension. It was so great that Dean Braxton knew that it was true that Jesus Christ, if he was the only one that was created by God, that Jesus Christ would have humbled himself more than him and suffered more than him on the cross so that he could have the freedom to choose to repent and be reconciled to God and have a love relationship with God. And the love they experience in heaven is far greater than anything you can experience in this physical realm. No, they don't have sexual intercourse and things like that in heaven. But what they experience is far greater than some mere physical pleasure like sexual intercourse. The love is so beyond what you can imagine. And that's the love that you can know and that you can experience. And so all of the suffering and everything that we see in this world is only being used as outward tools to corner us to a place where we turn to God and become born again of the Spirit of God, or birthed into a new creation in him. And where, once we are, we go through trials and testings as well that are used to unravel the deception and the things that are not of God in us, and to bring us into greater and greater conformity to the being of God's love, this ultimate perfection of love, which is described in the negative and the positive. God's ultimate purpose is that he has a corporate bride, or as it were, a beautiful house to inhabit, consisting of a beautiful mosaic of stones of infinite variety and beauty that make up that house. And so when one says that, why would God allow hell, a place of torment forever? I mean, if you're cut off from the source of love and you choose to rebel against it, what's left but complete torment? And people that experience going to hell when they die say, some of them have actually experienced the torment, others haven't, that the torment is far greater than anything you can experience in the physical dimension. And it would be horrifying to think that that goes on forever and ever and ever, which is what is the case with many. Because they cut themselves off and chose to be unwilling material. You can liken it onto this. The ultimate purpose is that God has a bride, or a house that he can inhabit. But in the process of building a house, there's a certain amount of waste material. And of course, when the house is finished, that waste material is relegated to the garbage dump. Do you want to be relegated to the garbage dump of the universe because you chose to rebel against the love of God? I don't think so. God's ultimate purpose is far greater. So we cannot blame God and say, well, God shouldn't have created an existence where there's all this suffering and where there's hell, because that is insignificant compared to the ultimate purpose, which is that he would have a corporate bride and that we could experience unspeakable pleasures of love, of our own unique creative qualities that can ever enlarge in creativity forever, in pleasurable fellowship with God and with his creation in the family of God. When food that you eat goes into your body, a large portion goes out as waste, but a small portion becomes the lasting part of the body because it passes through the filtering system, which represents the deceptions that people choose to buy into because they don't want the truth and they choose to reject the love of God. God will always give everyone the opportunity to choose to receive or reject his love. And I'm asking you to truly make that choice. And you can go to my website at ultimatemeaning.com, where there is, on the contact link, a prayer you can pray with music in the background, if you want to do it that way, or just pray on your own and truly cry from your being to ask Jesus Christ to be your Lord and Savior, to be the central treasure of your life, to ask the one true God, Yahweh, the Almighty, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, into your life. So I believe that answers all the questions. And so let me know. You can always send an email to let me know if you have come to the saving knowledge of God through Jesus Christ by watching this video or by anything else I've written, such as my book, which I have, Afterlife Incredible, Irrefutable, a 368-page large paperback, which you can get on Amazon, or you can get it in Kindle format on your digital device. And it is well written, effective book on the afterlife. Check it out. Thank you for watching this video.